They sang happy birthday like I wasn't standing right there. My daughter-in-law, eyes glittering with triumph, held the knife and made the first cut into the cake I had baked myself. My son clapped, lifted his glass of wine, and toasted her, thanking her for bringing this family together after a hard year. My name wasn't even mentioned. My 67th birthday. And they turned it into a celebration of her. And I just stood by the dishwasher unnoticed. I wasn't supposed to hear what came next. My grandson, only 6, tugged on my son's shirt and asked, "Why doesn't Grandma sit with us anymore?" My son glanced at his wife and laughed. "She likes being by herself, bud. Old people like quiet." I blinked. That wasn't a joke. He meant it. They had slowly made sure I wasn't at the table anymore. First, it was about seating. "We just need more room for the kids." Then it was sound. "You always complain when it's too loud, Mom." Finally, it was assumed, "She's happier in the kitchen." I watched them eat the meal I made. Watched them joke about shows I didn't watch anymore because the TV in my room didn't have streaming. Watched my daughter-in-law, Kristen, accept praise for setting up my dining table, using my china, under the light fixture Gerald installed the year our first grandson was born. I tried to smile, to play along. But the minute I saw Kristen handing out gift bags like she was the hostess of some charity gala and not standing in my house, the same house Gerald and I spent 40 years building, I felt the ground shift. This wasn't my home anymore. It was theirs. And they were letting me live in it like a border collie, useful, quiet, invisible. That night, after they left, I sat on the edge of my bed with a single slice of cake and tried to sing "Happy Birthday" to myself. I couldn't make it past the first word. The next morning, I woke up to a note on the fridge in Kristen's looping, cursive handwriting. "Thanks for yesterday. Leftovers are in the fridge, but don't touch the chocolate mousse." We promised it to Megan. Megan, their friend's teenage daughter. Not even family. But apparently, even she had more rights to my fridge than I did. I threw the note in the trash and sat down at the breakfast table, the same place Gerald used to sip coffee and read the paper, and realized I didn't want to be there anymore. Not just in the kitchen. In this house. In this arrangement. In this version of my life where I was an afterthought in my own story. So I opened the drawer where we kept the files. And I pulled out the envelope I hadn't looked at in over a year. Our deed. Because here's the thing they forgot. The house wasn't in my son's name. It never had been. Gerald and I bought it in 1986 with money from our first joint savings account, back when interest rates were 12%, and every dollar we saved came from skipped dinners out and brown bag lunches. We never added Nathan to the deed. He assumed. Kristen assumed. And for the last 18 months, they'd been living like it was already theirs. It wasn't. Yet. And that yet was about to become never. But before I made any decisions, I needed to confirm one thing. I opened my laptop, slow, dusty, almost in use now, and checked the property tax portal. The mailing address was still listed as my name. The owner, Coraline G. Whitman. I clicked on the mortgage tab. Paid off in 2012. No liens. No second owner. They really thought I wouldn't notice how they'd shifted the balance. How they made me feel like a guest in my own home. But I noticed. And I wasn't going to say a word. Not yet. I pulled out my planner, flipped to the address section, and highlighted a name I hadn't touched in years. Alan Clean, attorney at law. He handled Gerald's will. He was about to help me rewrite mine. I closed the planner and walked to the sink. Washed the single dessert plate I'd used last night. Dried it with a towel no one else ever used. Folded it the way I always did and placed it back on the rack. Then I went upstairs, opened the hallway closet, and pulled out the manila envelope Gerald had labeled, "Trust options discuss." He died before we ever had that discussion. But I was ready now. Because the last thing my son said to me before leaving last night wasn't "Happy birthday." It was, "Kristen wants to remodel the kitchen soon. Maybe in spring. You'll love it, Mom." Not "we want to." Not you and I. Just Kristen. And the remodel. Of my kitchen. They were already planning renovations in a home they didn't own. Using money that wasn't theirs. And dragging me along like a mute extra in a movie they were directing. But I had a different kind of script in mind. One where the final scene would leave them stunned. One where I wouldn't even have to raise my voice. Just a pen. And a signature. Before we continue, take a moment to let me know where you're watching from in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe to more powerful stories like this one. I told them I needed a break. Just a little weekend getaway to recharge, I said, after Kristen commented for the third time that I'd seemed a little off lately. Off. As if aging in silence while watching your life get hijacked by your son's overachieving wife was a mood swing. Nathan offered to drive me to the train station. Kristen had probably reminded him to, and I almost said yes. But I didn't want a farewell hug in the driveway. I didn't want fake concern at the curb. I wanted space. Real, untouched space. So I called a cab instead, packed a modest suitcase with 3 days' worth of clothes, and tucked the most important items into a slim leather portfolio. The deed to the house, a folder labeled Estate and Trusts, and Gerald's old notebook, the one he used when planning anything that really mattered. Inside that notebook were sketches of our vegetable garden layout, scribbled grocery lists from 1997, and in the back a list titled, "If I Go First." It was written in his careful, all capitals handwriting. The first line said, "Make sure Cora isn't taken advantage of." I stared at those words on the train, felt them echo in my chest like a promise I hadn't realized he had left behind. By the time I arrived at Alan's office, the sun had already dipped behind the skyline. His receptionist offered me tea and asked if I was there to discuss next of kin affairs. "No," I said, smiling faintly. "I'm here to remove some." Alan hadn't changed much, still wore corduroy blazers, still greeted me with 2 hands and a concerned look. When he closed the door behind us, he said, "You don't look like someone taking a weekend off." I opened the portfolio and slid everything across the desk. He flipped through the papers in silence, then nodded. "Are you ready to make this official?" "Not yet," I said. "I need to tell you everything first. And then you can tell me if I'm being cruel or if I'm just finally seeing clearly." So I told him about the birthday, about the gift bags, about the slow unraveling of my place in the house. I told him how I found them pricing kitchen counters online while ignoring the part where I still paid the water bill. How my name hadn't been mentioned at the table in months unless it was to say, "Don't mind Grandma." I explained away they'd turned my home into a set piece and me into a background character, and how they never once asked if I was happy because it never occurred to them that I might not be. When I was done, Alan closed the folder and leaned back. "You're not being cruel," he said. "You're being strategic. And maybe finally unapologetic." That's when I handed him Gerald's notebook. The page titled, "If I Go First." Alan skimmed it, then nodded again. "Okay, so we change everything. What do you want?" "I want the house put in a living trust," I said. "I want Kristen and Nathan removed from my estate plan completely. And I want every clause airtight so that if they even try to fight it, they lose access to everything." He didn't blink. "And what about Ava?" My lips parted slightly. I hadn't even said her name. I want her to have it all. But she can't touch it until she's 25. No cosigners, no early access except for tuition or housing. And if they pressure her? "There's a backup file," I said, tapping the folder. "Hidden at home. If they manipulate her or try to twist her hand, I'll give her everything in writing. And you'll have the original." Alan wrote everything down, slowly, carefully. And then, before the ink was even dry on his notes, he asked a final question. "Do you want them to know now?" I thought about that for a long time. My hand hovered over Gerald's notebook, tracing the edges of the leather. His name was etched in the bottom right corner. G. Whitman. Like he was still whispering to me. "No," I said. "Not yet. I want to watch them keep assuming. Keep planning. Keep laughing at my silence like it's a weakness." I looked up at Alan and met his eyes. Then one day, on my timeline, I'll let them open a letter they never saw coming. He smiled softly, the kind of smile older men give when they know exactly the kind of pain that has hardened into resolve. "Then we'll give them that letter." We spent the next 3 hours reviewing every clause. removing Nathan from the will, including proof of property ownership, adding protections for Ava, filing paperwork that would guarantee no signature could be forged, no account tapped, no sale made without my written approval. And by the time we were done, the legacy they thought they'd inherited had vanished, replaced by one that would unfold in silence, protected by law and powered by truth.
I stayed in a hotel that night.
Quiet, unbothered. And when I got back on the train Sunday morning, I looked out the window at the passing trees and knew, without question, that the next chapter of my life wouldn't be written by Kristen's Pinterest boards or Nathan's passive shrug. It would be written by me. And Gerald, still watching, still warning, still reminding me to protect the life we built before someone else finished stealing it. The first thing I saw when I walked in was the box.
Cardboard.
Labeled Pantry Declutter for donation. Sitting right where Gerald used to put his work boots. Right where Ava left her backpack every day after school. Inside the box was a mess of things that shouldn't have been there. My canisters, a set of holiday mugs I'd collected over 20 years, and the teacup Gerald gave me for our 30th anniversary. I stared at it for a long time. Long enough that Kristen finally looked up from the kitchen island and said, "Oh, you're back. How was the spa?" She smiled like nothing had happened. Like that box wasn't an erasure in progress. I didn't answer. Just walked past her, past the kitchen she now decorated seasonally, into the living room, where even the couch pillows had changed without my knowing. That night, I couldn't sleep. I laid awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to the quiet creaks of the house, and realized something horrifying. I didn't know what day Ava had piano lessons anymore. I didn't know if Nathan still packed his lunch. I didn't even know where they kept the peanut butter now. Everything had shifted around me while I stood still. Or worse, while they moved me out of the way. The next morning, Kristen tapped on my door with her too cheerful voice and said, "Do you have a minute to chat?" I sat at the edge of the bed and told her to come in. She was holding a folder. I recognized it. It used to be mine. Pale blue with a sticky label that once read recipes. That label had been peeled off. "Okay," she said, like a manager leading a quarterly meeting. "So Nathan and I have been talking, and we think it's time to have some structure, you know? For everyone's sake." She opened the folder and pulled out a printed document with highlighted sections. It was a rental agreement. I didn't blink. I didn't interrupt. I let her talk. "So, since you have the upstairs bedroom and private bath, plus access to all shared living spaces, we've estimated fair market value at $975 per month. But obviously, since you're family, we'd only ask for $750. I looked up slowly. "And if I say no?" Her smile didn't falter, but her voice dipped. Just slightly. "Well, we just want everyone to be clear on responsibilities. We're not kicking you out, obviously. But we've taken over the taxes, and Nathan's covering the utilities now, and with the renovations coming." She trailed off, waiting for my nod of agreement. For my compliance. For that old habit I had of smoothing things over so no one had to feel awkward. But I said nothing. Just took the lease, folded it, and slid it under the ceramic lamp beside my bed. She stood there a moment longer, expecting something. Maybe an outburst. Maybe tears. Maybe gratitude for being offered a discount to live in my own house. When she finally left, I locked the door behind her. And then I pulled out my planner and circled Saturday. That was the day everything would change. That week passed in silence. Kristen acted like everything was normal, floating around the house in her matching sweatsuits and loud slippers, humming to herself as she reorganized cabinets and added new rules to the kitchen whiteboard. No food waste, use compost bin, label your leftovers. She didn't notice that I wasn't labeling mine anymore, because I wasn't leaving any. On Friday, I told Nathan we needed to talk. He looked confused, as if he hadn't been part of the lease idea. But he nodded. We sat at the kitchen table, the same one where Gerald taught him how to balance a checkbook, and I laid the folded lease between us. "I'm not signing this," I said, evenly. "I won't pay to live in the home your father and I built." He ran a hand through his hair, suddenly avoiding eye contact. "Mom, it's not like that." Kristen thought it might help with, I cut him off. Did you think it would help? Or are you just letting her do your thinking for you? He flushed, sat back, sighed. I'm tired, Mom. She's trying to manage everything. I don't want to fight. I leaned forward. You know what your father said to me the week before he died? Nathan looked up. He said, make sure I don't leave you in a house full of people who only see what they can take. Nathan looked like I'd slapped him. But I wasn't done. You've taken space, privacy, family meals, Gerald's chair. And now you want to take ownership. Bit by bit, month by month, lease by lease. Nathan swallowed. We just thought.
No.
She thought. And you let her. He didn't respond. Didn't apologize. Just sat there, half boy, half coward. And in that moment, I realized the truth. Nathan wasn't cruel. He was complicit. And that was worse. Saturday came fast. I packed my suitcase again. Smaller this time. No need for the file folder. No need for anything but a change of clothes and the envelope I'd prepared. At exactly 9 a.m., I walked down the stairs and into the living room where Kristen was on her laptop planning something brunch. Curtains? The next insult? I'm stepping out for the day, I said lightly. She barely looked up.
Cool.
We'll be in and out. Megan's bringing her little one over. I nodded. Tell her I said hello. And then I placed the envelope on the kitchen island. One page inside.
Typed.
It said, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. This house belongs to me, legally and fully. You are tenants at will. By my grace, not by right. Effective immediately, I have taken steps to legally secure this property in an irrevocable living trust. Your names are not on it. You have no legal claim to this home now or in the future. Do not try to evict me. I've already evicted your assumptions. Sincerely, Coraline Whitman, owner. By the time Kristen finished reading the letter, I was already halfway to the edge of town. I'd booked a small Airbnb on the waterfront, just a one-bedroom guest house behind a retired couple's home, quiet and surrounded by ferns. It smelled like cedar and sea air. Gerald would have loved it.
Kristen didn't call that day. She didn't text.
But Nathan did. At 4:17 p.m. A single message. Mom, what is this? Call me. I didn't. Instead, I poured a cup of tea, opened the window to the sound of waves hitting dock planks, and let the silence speak for me. They'd mistaken my silence for surrender for so long, they never considered it might be strategy. The next morning, I checked the security app on my phone. Gerald had installed a full system years ago, and I'd never removed my administrator access. I tapped into the front porch camera feed and saw Kristen pacing on the steps, phone in one hand, my envelope in the other. Her lips were moving fast. Nathan stood nearby, hands on his hips, face red. He looked like a man who'd just realized his mother had power he couldn't co-sign away. At 10:42 a.m., I got a voicemail. Kristen. Her voice was breathless, performative, frantic in that way people get when their plan crumbles in real time. Hi Coraline, listen, this is all just a big misunderstanding, I think. Can we sit down and talk this through? I mean, putting the house in a trust? That feels extreme. We're family. And families don't do legal ambushes. I replayed that word 3 times. Ambush. As if she'd been the one ambushed. As if I hadn't been erased in slow motion for 2 years. I didn't reply. That afternoon, Kristen sent another message. You can't just take everything. Nathan has invested so much into the house. This isn't fair. I stared at the message for a full minute before typing a response. And then deleted it. Let them stew. Let them feel the weight of something they couldn't negotiate with charm or shame. 3 days passed.
Then the knock.
Not on my Airbnb door. At the house. Security footage again. A county sheriff's cruiser pulled into the driveway. Kristen came running out of the house in leggings and a cropped sweatshirt, her voice raised. The deputy held up a hand, calm, professional. I'd expected this. I had told Alan it was only a matter of time before they'd try to flip the script. See, I didn't just put the house in a trust. I filed paperwork to have it legally recognized as my sole residence and issued a formal notice of conditional tenancy for Nathan and Kristen, dated retroactively. Just in case. So when they tried to claim I'd abandoned the property, that it was communal family space now, they triggered their own paperwork. The sheriff had a clipboard. He wasn't there to remove me. He was there to inform them that I was still the legal owner, and their standing in the house was contingent on a signed rental agreement, which they had tried to reverse against me. I watched Kristen's face pale on the camera feed. Her mouth opened, then closed. Nathan came out after a moment, talked to the deputy. Then they both stood on the lawn, stunned. Because for the first time in months, maybe years, they weren't the ones holding the leverage. Later that night, I received another voicemail, this time from Nathan. His voice was small again. The same voice he used when he scraped his knee at 8 and tried not to cry in front of the neighbor kids. Mom,
I'm sorry.
I didn't know Kristen was going to push it like that. I thought the lease would make things easier. We can fix this, okay? Just please call me. I didn't, because I remembered how easily he let her hand me a lease without even blinking. How he stood by when my anniversary teacup was boxed like junk. How he said nothing when she remodeled the dining room without asking if I wanted to keep Gerald's table. It wasn't just Kristen who erased me. It was Nathan's silence that made it possible. I called Alan instead. Told him everything. And he said something I didn't expect. Cora, do you want to keep them in the house? I was quiet. Because, honestly, I didn't know. I didn't know if I could stomach the thought of walking back in and hearing Kristen's voice on speakerphone, giving orders to the contractor about backsplash colors. Or seeing Nathan glance at me like I was some relic, best kept in soft lighting and low volume. But part of me still wanted something. Maybe not a reconciliation, but a reckoning. I wanted Nathan to see the line I had drawn. I wanted Ava to remember that her grandmother once said, "Enough." So, I told Alan the truth. I don't want them out yet. He nodded. I'll draft a conditional occupancy agreement. But if they try anything again, even a whisper of a claim, you pull the trigger. Eviction notice. No more warnings. Agreed. That night, I wrote a letter to Ava. Not one to be opened in 10 years. One to be handed to her at school the next day. I told her I missed our breakfast chats. That I missed her questions about constellations and whether the moon really followed us in the car. I told her none of what was happening was her fault. And that someday, when she had her own place, I'd teach her how to cook the way Gerald taught me. I signed it. With all the love they forgot how to give you, Grandma. I left it with a trusted neighbor whose daughter shared Ava's bus stop. Just said it was from me, and to make sure Ava got it directly. The next morning, the doorbell rang at my Airbnb. Ava stood there, in her school uniform, her backpack slung low, eyes bright with something I hadn't seen in a long time. Defiance. She didn't say anything right away, just stepped forward and wrapped her arms around me.
Tight.
Like she had been holding her breath for weeks and finally felt safe enough to exhale. I told Dad I wanted to see you, she whispered. And he said it wasn't a good time. So I told Mom I was going to the library. I smiled into her hair. Let's go get pancakes, I said. We sat across from each other at a booth in the back of Marion's diner. Ava ordered pancakes with whipped cream and strawberries. I ordered black coffee and eggs over medium, just like I used to when Gerald and I came here after Sunday church. It felt like rewinding the clock. Except the little girl across from me was no longer just curious. She was angry. Mom says you're being manipulative, she said, voice steady, too steady for someone her age. She says you're trying to divide the family. I didn't flinch. I didn't try to defend myself with platitudes or easy reassurances. Instead, I asked, "What do you think?" Ava picked up her fork, pressed it against her pancake, but didn't eat. She stared at it like the answer might be written in syrup. "I think she's scared of you now," she said finally, "and that makes her meaner." I took a breath. "And your father?" A longer pause. Then she whispered, "I'm starting to forget what he looked like before she changed him." That's when my heart cracked. Not because of what she said, but because of how quietly she said it. Like she'd been rehearsing the line in her mind, trying to figure out if it was okay to say out loud. Trying to measure whether I'd still be the safe one. I reached across the table, placed my hand gently over hers, and said, Your dad loves you. He's just confused. And confused people sometimes let the wrong one steer. She nodded. Didn't cry. Didn't flinch. Just nodded like someone who had already made peace with that version of love. I read the letter, she said. The one you sent me. I smiled. Good. I want to live with you. The sentence landed between us like a thunderclap. I studied her expression, making sure she wasn't just trying to escape curfews or bad chores. But she wasn't running away. She was reaching out. You have to talk to your parents about that, I said gently. I did, she replied, staring straight into me. They laughed. I nodded slowly. Of course they did. Mom said, Grandma's trying to buy your loyalty. And Dad didn't say anything, just shook his head like I was being dramatic. I blinked back, a wave of heat in my throat. Ava took a deep breath, then pulled something from her backpack. A small USB flash drive. She pushed it across the table. They say everything behind closed doors. But our doors aren't thick. I didn't pick it up. Not yet. What's on it? I asked. She looked down. Conversations. Stuff they say when they think I'm asleep. When they don't think I'm listening. And what do you want me to do with it? Her voice sharpened, finally betraying her age. I want you to make them stop lying. Silence fell again. A slow, heavy silence that didn't feel awkward but final. I picked up the drive, put it in my purse, and nodded. All right, I said. But you need to understand, this isn't just about them. If we do this, we don't go back to the way things were. She looked at me like I was underestimating her. Good, she said. I don't want to go back. We left the diner hand in hand. I walked her to the bus stop where the neighbor waited to walk her home. Ava squeezed my hand tight before leaving. If you ever move again, she whispered, tell me first. I promised her I would. Then I walked back to the guest house, locked the door behind me, and plugged the flash drive into my laptop. There were 6 folders, each one named by date. Inside, audio clips, screenshots, even a few grainy videos taken from the crack of her bedroom door. I clicked on the most recent file. Kristen's voice filled the room. If she thinks putting that house in a trust makes her invincible, she's wrong. Old people make mistakes. All we need is one good example of her forgetting something important, and boom, mental decline. Nathan's going to record the next dinner conversation. Another clip. Nathan, quieter, tired. I don't like this, Chris. Then don't look. I'll handle it. A third. Kristen again. She's trying to brainwash Ava. You'll see. It's all about control. We just need to get her off balance. She's close already. I can feel it. I paused the file, stared at the screen for a long time. Not in shock. Not even rage. Just clarity. They weren't trying to disinherit me. They were trying to erase me.
But Ava?
Ava had been listening, watching, documenting. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel alone. I sent the folder to Alan immediately. Told him I'd explain everything in person. Then I wrote a new letter. Not to Ava this time. To Kristen. Typed in 14-point Times New Roman. Centered. 1 page. Kristen, I know what you're doing. I know about the recordings, the conversations, the manipulation. And now you know this. Your daughter trusts me more than she fears you. That alone should terrify you. I'll be home soon.
Coraline.
I printed it, sealed it, and handed it to my neighbor to drop off at the mailbox. No return address. No fanfare. Just a silent detonation. And then I made one more call. To Ava's school. I scheduled a meeting with the counselor. Just to ask a question. What does it take for a minor to request a change in custodial guardianship without triggering a custody battle? I didn't know if I'd go through with it. But I wanted the information. Because the little girl who used to sit on my lap and trace the lines of Gerald's face in framed photos had grown into something stronger. A witness. And if her parents couldn't see that, then they didn't deserve to call her their legacy. I came back home on a Tuesday morning. Not unannounced. Just uninvited. The key still worked, of course. Nathan hadn't gotten around to changing the locks, probably still pretending the deed wasn't legally sealed away in a trust with my name engraved in every clause. The moment I stepped into the entryway, I could hear it. Silence. Not peace. Not rest. Just that strange, humming tension that creeps into a home where truth has been hiding too long. Kristen was at the kitchen table on her laptop. She looked up the way someone looks up when a neighbor knocks in the middle of a private fight. Polite on the surface, furious underneath. "Oh," she said. "You're back." I walked in without answering. Set my overnight bag on the floor. Looked around. The furniture had shifted again. Gerald's chair had been moved. Not into storage, no. Kristen wouldn't dare pack it away so openly. She'd just rotated it. Repositioned it toward the window, like a museum piece.
Detached.
Immobile. A relic in his own home. Nathan appeared a second later from the hallway, adjusting the collar of his work shirt. "Hey, Mom," he said, voice stiff. "We didn't know you were coming back today." "You don't need to know when I come back," I said calmly. "This is still my home." Kristen closed her laptop with a loud click. There it was. The start of the next performance. "We just thought, with everything going on, it might be good to discuss a more permanent setup for you. Maybe closer to the waterfront? Somewhere quiet, more age-appropriate." My jaw didn't clench. My pulse didn't spike. I just smiled, like someone holding a full hand at the poker table while the others didn't realize they were already all in.
"I've already got a setup," I said.
"And it's going to be permanent, all right. But not for me." Nathan stepped in, his voice a shade too loud. "Mom, let's not make this a whole thing. We just want what's best for everyone." I turned toward him slowly, and I asked, "Did you record our last dinner?" He blinked. "What?" Kristen's head snapped up. I repeated it. "Did you record our last dinner conversation? You know, to gather evidence I'm mentally declining." Kristen stood, her chair sliding back too fast. "Okay, what the hell are you talking about?" But I didn't look at her. I kept my eyes locked on Nathan, the man I gave birth to, the one who used to fall asleep in the back seat after soccer practice, head on Gerald's jacket. His throat tightened. He shook his head. "Of course not. That's ridiculous."
He lied.
I knew he lied, because I had already sent the recordings to Alan, already cross-referenced the dates, already matched the conversation he taped with a note in Kristen's voice. This is perfect. She can't even remember what she said 10 minutes ago. But I said nothing. I just watched the lie leave his lips. Watched his mouth form the betrayal his father once feared. Gerald knew. In that notebook, beneath the line about protecting me from being taken advantage of, there was another sentence. "If Nathan ever turns on her, don't wait for him to come around."
Act.
I hadn't understood it back then.
But I did now.
Because he didn't raise a monster. But somehow, Kristen married one into being. I turned to Kristen. "I'm invoking the terms of the trust." She crossed her arms. "What does that mean?" "It means you're now formal tenants. And unless you sign the new occupancy agreement Alan is overnighting today, I'll begin eviction proceedings by the end of the week." Kristen actually laughed. "Oh, come on. This is crazy. You wouldn't kick out your own son." "I'm not," I said. "I'm kicking out you. Nathan is welcome to stay if he wants. Alone." The silence that followed cracked open like thunder. Nathan looked between us. And then, instead of standing beside me or even stepping between us, he said, "I think we should talk to a lawyer." And that's when I realized Gerald had been right about him all along. He would rather delegate morality than risk conflict. "I already did," I said. "Alan has everything, including the recordings. The ones your daughter made." Kristen flinched. "So did Nathan." "You're bluffing," she said.
No.
"I'm done bluffing." Then I added, "And Ava? She wants to live with me." It landed like a shot across the bow. Kristen stepped forward, venom ready. "She's 12. She doesn't get to choose." I raised my chin. "Actually, she does. Under state law, minors over 12 can express preference during custodial review. Her school counselor already has the forms. She's written a statement." Nathan finally spoke. She went to her counselor?" "She's a smart girl," I said, softening only slightly. And she's tired of pretending like everything's fine when it's not. He ran his hand over his face. She doesn't understand what this will do to the family. I walked to Gerald's chair, put one hand gently on its back.
No.
You don't understand what you already did. They didn't stop me when I went upstairs.
Didn't follow.
Didn't argue. Because in that moment, they realized what I'd been slowly preparing them for. You don't get to erase someone and keep the house. You don't get to gaslight your own mother and call it boundaries. You don't get to sell off a legacy 1 teaspoon at a time and expect the silence to last forever. I stayed in my room the rest of the day. I heard the murmurs, the tension, the late-night arguing downstairs. And when I opened Ava's letter drawer in the nightstand, I found another note she'd slipped in before I returned. I heard them talking again. Mom said she's going to find a way to make you seem unstable. Dad said, just let her burn herself out. You're not burning, Grandma. You're starting a fire. I sat on the bed, holding that note, and realized something that brought tears to my eyes for the first time in weeks. She wasn't just protecting me anymore. She was standing with me, and soon, she'd be standing beside me, legally. It was the call I'd been waiting for. Mrs. Holloway, Ava's school counselor, reached out on Thursday morning. Calm, professional, but layered with something unmistakable beneath her tone. Concern. Hi, Mrs. Whitman. I just wanted to let you know that Ava came in today. She brought documentation. She's asked for a formal family mediation. We think it's best that you, your son, and his wife attend. I closed my eyes. She brought the flash drive, didn't she? A pause.
She did.
And I've listened to some of it. I believe we have a duty to proceed very carefully here. I'm obligated to notify her parents, but also to honor her agency in the process. Then we'll be there, I said. Thank you. We arrived separately. Kristen and Nathan pulled up in their silver SUV, like a couple headed to a mortgage refinancing appointment. Kristen wore sunglasses inside, the kind you can't see through. Nathan walked 3 paces behind her, head down, his tie loose and slightly crooked. I came alone, wearing Gerald's wool coat, the one he wore when we signed the mortgage on the house. It still smelled like cedar and laundry soap and the life we built before anyone tried to erase it. Ava sat inside the counselor's office with her knees pressed together and her hands folded so tightly I could see the white of her knuckles. But her expression didn't waver. Not once. She didn't look like a scared little girl. She looked like a witness stepping up to the stand. Mrs. Holloway began. We're here today to discuss some serious concerns brought forward by Ava Whitman regarding the home environment and custodial preferences. Ava has expressed a strong desire to reside with her grandmother, citing emotional instability and verbal manipulation at home. She has also provided evidence. Kristen's mouth dropped open. She's 12. Nathan placed a hand on her knee, trying to calm her, but she batted it away like a mosquito. Where is she even getting this language? Emotional instability? Who's feeding her this crap? Mrs. Holloway didn't flinch. Actually, she used the word controlling. The rest of my terms. Ava cleared her throat. I used other words too, like scared and ignored. Silence. Kristen laughed, short and bitter. Oh, please. This is a tantrum. She's being manipulated by Coraline. She's always had a dramatic streak. That's enough, I said flatly. And for the first time in that room, Kristen went quiet. I turned to Mrs. Holloway. Do you have the flash drive? She nodded, opening a small envelope and placing it on the desk. I've reviewed the first 5 files. I haven't had time to go through everything, but what I've heard is troubling. It includes references to coercion, verbal threats, and long-term emotional pressure. Out of context, Kristen snapped. But Ava cut her off. You told Dad you'd pull me out of school if I didn't stop talking to Grandma. You said you'd make me homeschool with you. I recorded that. Want me to play it? Kristen stood up so fast her chair skidded back. Nathan finally found his voice. Ava, please. This isn't how we solve things. Ava turned to him, voice trembling but unbreakable. Then how do you solve things, Dad? You don't talk. You just let her make all the decisions and then say it's not your fault. You let her tell me who to love.
Who to trust.
And you don't stop her even when she lies about grandma being unstable. Nathan looked stunned. Like he didn't expect to be held accountable by the child he thought he'd trained to nod and smile. Mrs. Holloway placed both hands on the desk, her voice calm but firm. Here's what happens next. We will refer this case to our in-house social worker for family review. Ava has requested a formal statement of preference to live with her grandmother, and the state allows us to begin those proceedings for minors aged 12 and older. Kristen turned on me then. Face red. Voice sharp. You don't get to take her.
I didn't take her, I said.
She came to me. She doesn't know what she's doing. She knows enough to record you whispering about faking mental decline. She knows enough to notice when a mother uses threats to manage love. She knows when someone's playing a role instead of being a parent. Kristen's hands balled into fists. But I wasn't afraid of her anymore. Not after everything she said behind closed doors. Not after the chair. Not after the lease. Not after Gerald's voice in my head telling me, "Don't wait for them to love you right." Mrs. Holloway stood, signaling the meeting was done for now. We'll be in contact with next steps. But I want to be clear, Ava is not in trouble. And this office is a safe space for her. If either of you, she looked at Kristen and Nathan, attempts to retaliate or isolate her during this process, we will escalate. They didn't respond. Not right away. We left the room slowly, Ava by my side. In the hallway, as the doors closed behind us, she looked up at me. Do you think they'll hate me now? I knelt to her height. They'll be angry. That's not the same thing. But they'll say I'm ungrateful, that I'm turning on them. You're not turning on them, I said. You're turning toward the truth. And then I took her hand. We walked out of the school together. One small hand in mine. One legacy finally breaking free of silence. The letter came 2 days later. Courier delivered. Thick cream envelope. Gold embossed law firm letterhead. Kristen's name wasn't on it. Just Nathan Whitman. But we both knew who had written the check. I opened it slowly, deliberately, standing at the same kitchen counter where Gerald once kissed the back of my neck while I stirred soup on cold evenings. I hadn't cooked in this kitchen in weeks. Not since the tension turned the air sour and every drawer rearranged, without my consent. Inside the envelope, 3 pages. Formal.
Cold.
Legalese dripping from every sentence. Notice of custodial interference. They were accusing me of manipulating Ava, demanding she return to their home full-time until a court could determine the best interest of the minor. There was even a thinly veiled threat about seeking mental health evaluation and elder guardianship protections if I refused. I read the line 3 times. Then I laughed. Not bitter. Not manic. Just that tired, cracked kind of laugh that sounds like paper tearing after too many folds. They were really going to try it. The guardianship route. The same tactic Ava overheard weeks ago. Kristen whispering through clenched teeth. All we need is one moment where she slips. Then we take over. They thought I'd panic. Thought I'd run for some unlisted therapist's note or stammer through an emotional voicemail they could use against me. But I'd already prepared for this. Ava wasn't the only one recording things. I pulled out my phone, opened the legal folder I created 2 months ago, and queued up the message. Voicemail number 13. Kristen's voice. Clear as crystal. Just let her hang herself. We'll play it like concern. Call it grief-related confusion. People eat that stuff up. No one wants to believe their sweet old mom can still destroy you legally. I transferred it to a thumb drive, placed it in a padded envelope, and dropped it off at Alan's office an hour later. He called me that night. I just finished the audio, he said. I'll file the response first thing Monday. But I want to be clear, Cora, if they push this, we escalate. Mediation first. Full hearing next. Are you ready for that? I thought of Ava. Of how small her shoulders looked under her school backpack. Of the way she curled against me when we watched reruns of Gerald's favorite westerns, asking me what justice used to look like when it still wore a cowboy hat. I've never been more ready, I said. The next day, Nathan showed up at the door. Alone. No Kristen. No lawyer. No flash of entitlement. Just that empty, gray version of him I'd grown to expect. Eyes dull, face drawn, the kind of man who didn't even notice he'd already surrendered. He stood on the porch, like a kid waiting to be grounded. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped aside, let him in.
Didn't offer tea.
Didn't gesture toward the couch. He sat anyway. "Kristen didn't want me to come," he started. "She thinks it looks weak." "It is weak," I said. "If you're only here to beg instead of change." He flinched but didn't argue. I didn't know she was recording plans. The voicemail. The trust stuff. I thought it was just frustration. I raised an eyebrow. "Frustration doesn't involve legal threats, Nathan." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice low. "Do you think I'm a bad father?" I paused. Because the answer wasn't simple. So I gave him the truth. "I think you're a tired man who gave up the wheel and called it love."
He winced.
"And I think your daughter deserved a father, not a PR manager for her mother's reputation." That landed harder. He rubbed his eyes, nodded once, then whispered, "Do you really want to raise her?" "I already have." That shut him up for a while. I sat in Gerald's chair. The one I'd moved back to its rightful spot. The house was quiet, but not like before. Not the cold, ghost town silence of being ignored. This was something sharper, like still air before a storm. Nathan stood slowly, walked to the front door, and paused. "I miss him too," he said. "Gerald." I looked at him for a long time, then replied, "Then stop being the kind of man he would have warned me about." He nodded.
Left.
No hug. No promises. Just a single step toward, maybe change. Maybe. The following Monday, we met in a neutral office space. Ava came with me. Kristen and Nathan arrived together, but you could feel the frost between them. Kristen wore her courtroom outfit again. Pencil skirt, pristine blouse, heels just one click too loud on the tile. She didn't speak to me directly. Not once. Just whispered to their attorney while Ava sat beside me, clutching the small blue notebook I'd given her. Gerald's notebook. The one I'd saved all this time. The one that still had his notes in the back. "Don't let fear decide the ending." Alan opened the meeting with a calm summary. "We are here today to resolve a custodial concern raised by Ava Whitman and supported by testimonial and recorded evidence. I have submitted all relevant materials to the family court judge, including audio files that suggest an effort to manipulate perceptions of Coraline's mental health." Kristen folded her arms. "Those recordings are out of context." Ava spoke up. "They're not. You said what you said, and I heard all of it." The lawyer tried to pivot. "Regardless of what was said in private moments, we believe Ava's decision is being influenced by an emotional campaign conducted by Mrs. Whitman." Alan didn't flinch. He opened a folder, pulled out a printed screenshot. It was a text message. From Kristen to Nathan. "If she keeps pushing this Ava thing, we'll go nuclear. I'll bring up the meds, the migraines, even the fall down the stairs. Mental decline will stick if we push hard enough." Silence. You could hear the HVAC clicking. Kristen went pale. Nathan looked like he wanted to disappear through the floor. And Ava, my beautiful, brave Ava, stood up and walked to the window, facing away from them, facing toward the sun. The lawyer finally spoke. "We'd like to request a recess to speak privately." Alan nodded. "Take all the time you need, but I suggest you advise your client to withdraw the custody threat. Permanently." They left the room. Ava came back to sit next to me. Her hands shook a little. I took them in mine. "Are you scared?" I asked softly. She looked at me and said something I'll never forget. I was. But then I remembered. This is our story now. And that was when I realized. She wasn't just my granddaughter anymore. She was my witness. My voice. My legacy. We didn't speak much on the drive to court. Not because there was tension, just because there didn't need to be words anymore. Ava sat quietly beside me, her fingers tracing the leather edge of Gerald's notebook. She had barely put it down since the mediation. I'd offered her other journals, pens, something new to write her thoughts in. But she wanted this one. "This is what he used to build," she told me. "Now I want to use it to protect." We arrived early. Alan met us at the steps. "There's been a shift," he said in a hushed tone. "Kristen's lawyer submitted a notice of withdrawal this morning. Technically, they're still showing up, but they're not going to fight Ava's request anymore. At least, not today." I nodded, but I didn't relax. Because with people like Kristen, retreat was just repositioning. The courtroom was small, intimate, less like a trial, more like a town council meeting, but the energy was no less electric. Kristen and Nathan sat on the left. I was surprised to see Kristen without her armor. No blazer, no heels, just a charcoal gray sweater dress and flat shoes. Her hair was pulled back tight. Her eyes didn't meet mine. Nathan looked like he hadn't slept. Ava and I sat on the right with Alan just behind us. The judge, a woman with silver-streaked hair and eyes that could pierce granite, opened the file slowly. She didn't rush. She didn't posture. And when she spoke, her voice was steady and direct. "This is an informal custodial preference hearing initiated by minor Ava Whitman, age 12, requesting partial residence and guardianship reassignment to her grandmother, Coraline Whitman. The court has reviewed initial documentation, including statements, digital media, and third-party counselor reports." She paused, looked at Ava. "Ava, would you like to speak first?" Ava stood. Her voice didn't tremble. "My mom says I'm being manipulated," she said. "But all I know is that when I'm with Grandma, I feel like I exist. Like I'm not someone's project or problem or warning sign. I don't want to stop loving my dad. I just don't want to be managed anymore." She sat down. The room stayed quiet. The judge turned to Kristen and Nathan. "Do you have a formal objection?" Kristen looked up, opened her mouth, then closed it again. Nathan finally whispered, "No, Your Honor." The judge turned to me. "Mrs. Whitman, do you have anything to add?" I hadn't planned to speak, but I reached into my bag and pulled out Gerald's notebook, held it gently with both hands, then walked it up to the judge. She accepted it without question. Open to the page I had marked with a ribbon. "If Nathan ever turns on her, don't wait. Protect her. Do what I couldn't. Don't let kindness make you slow." The judge read the words, let them sit in the air, then turned the page. More notes, little sketches, budget numbers, a list titled "Best Moments with Cora." Under it, her laugh, the way she folds towels, how she knows when I'm lying. At the bottom of the list, in fading ink, "She's always been the brave one. I hope that never stops." The judge closed the notebook gently, nodded, then looked back at me. "You've built more than a case, Mrs. Whitman. You've built a life worth protecting." She turned to Ava. "Ava, the court is granting your request. You may reside with your grandmother on a full-time basis, with scheduled visitation pending future review. We'll work with the family counselor to structure a gradual transition. But this ruling takes effect today." Ava's fingers clutched mine so tight, I thought we might fuse together. Kristen made a sound, low, like a dog swallowing a growl. But she didn't speak. Nathan stood. "I'd like to say something." The judge nodded. He faced Ava, but not really. More like the space beside her. Like even now, he couldn't meet her eyes. "I didn't want this to happen," he said. "But I didn't stop it either. I let it get this far because I didn't want to admit how far we drifted." Ava didn't answer, didn't nod, didn't cry. She just watched him with the steady, patient gaze of someone who had waited too long for the wrong person to notice her. Kristen rose next, but the judge raised a hand. "Let me be very clear, Mrs. Whitman," she said, addressing Kristen. "You may not retaliate. Not emotionally. Not verbally. Not legally. This child has demonstrated maturity, clarity, and agency. I strongly suggest you focus on rebuilding trust, not reclaiming control." Kristen sat down, face burning. And that was it. We walked out of the courtroom into cold morning air. And for the first time since Gerald died, I felt something close to peace. Outside, Alan placed a hand on my shoulder. "We'll file the final papers today, and we'll start the housing transfer next week." "What about the trust?" I asked. He smiled. "Still ironclad. Ava's protected. and as of today, legally resident. Kristen and Nathan no longer have standing. Ava pulled me aside as we walked toward the car. Do you think he'll ever forgive me? I paused, then said, he has to figure out how to forgive himself first. That's the harder part. She nodded slowly, then added, do you forgive him? I looked at the sky.
Gray. Clean.
Bracing. Not yet, I said. But I'm trying. She leaned into me, and together we drove home. Not back to a house, but home. The invitation came in a navy blue envelope with gold lettering. You are cordially invited to the 8th grade advancement ceremony of Ava C. Whitman. I stared at the middle initial, the C. My name. I hadn't asked her to take it. I hadn't even known she filed the paperwork. But when I asked her about it, she just smiled and said, I wanted a name that meant something. Not something I inherited by default. Something I chose. That morning, I helped her pin her hair. We used the silver comb that Gerald gave me on our 40th anniversary. Ava insisted on wearing it, even though it didn't match the school's uniform colors. It doesn't have to match, she said. It just has to belong. We arrived early, took our seats in the second row. I noticed Nathan in the back. No Kristen. He was alone. Dressed neatly. Eyes sunken with exhaustion, but alert.
He nodded when he saw me.
I nodded back. Ava had insisted he be allowed to come. I don't want him erased, she said. I just don't want him to edit me anymore. The ceremony was small. 30 students. 100 folding chairs. Cheap plastic programs with misaligned ink. But when Ava walked up to the podium, everything else faded. She didn't shake. She didn't stutter. She stood there with Gerald's notebook in her hand, clutched like a script or a shield, and read from a piece of paper she folded 3 times before opening. When people say family, they usually mean parents. But sometimes, family is the person who sat at your bedside when your nightmares weren't monsters. They were just mornings. Sometimes, family is the person who tells you the truth even when it hurts. Who doesn't ask you to be quiet to keep the peace. Who doesn't trade your love for convenience. My family is sitting in the second row. Her name is Coraline Whitman. She's my grandmother. And today I'd like to share something. I've legally changed my name. My middle name. It's not Kristen anymore. As of last week, my legal name is Ava Coraline Whitman. The crowd gasped softly. Then they stood. A wave of people rising without cue, without music. Just the gravity of her words pulling everyone up like a tide. Nathan remained seated at first. Then slowly he rose too. His hands trembled. His eyes were glassy. But he stood. Ava looked right at me and smiled. And I felt Gerald in that room. In every chair leg. In every breath. In the corners of the notebook Ava held like a baton passed forward. When she walked off stage, she bypassed the principal's handshake and ran straight into my arms. We held each other like we had every day since the silence broke. Fiercely. Freely. After the ceremony, Nathan approached us.
Tentative.
Hollow.
Hi, he said.
Can we talk? Ava didn't move. She stood beside me, arms crossed, protective of her peace. I nodded. He looked at her, eyes red. You were brave. Braver than I've ever been. I'm sorry it took losing you to realize what I gave up. Ava tilted her head. Are you sorry because you're not in control? Or because you didn't protect me? He swallowed, took his time, then said, both. Ava nodded once, then turned to me. I'm ready to go home. We left him, standing there. Not out of cruelty, but because grace doesn't mean giving everyone a second chance at your expense. Back at the house, we made pancakes. Just like the morning after her first legal win. Maple syrup. Gerald's mug filled with flowers on the table. Afterward, Ava opened her notebook. Can I read you something I wrote? She asked. I nodded. She read aloud. You gave me a name, but more than that, you gave me the courage to use my voice. You didn't rescue me. You made me brave enough to walk out on my own. They thought silence was weakness. But they forgot silence can be a storm, a buildup. And one day, it breaks. And when it does, It washes away everything that stood on stolen ground. I couldn't speak. I just held her hand and let the tears come. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just a victory. It was a reclamation, a voice, of love, of legacy, and of Gerald's quiet, lifelong promise. Make sure she's safe. Ava was safe now, because she was heard,
And so was I.
we weren't just survivors. We were architects, rebuilding what no one would tear down again. Not with silence. Not with paperwork. Not with shame. Just truth. One page at a time. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to be reminded that silence isn't weakness, it's power waiting to speak. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and tell us in the comments, what's one truth you wish you had said sooner?